How did the 1983 basic set encourage some of us to become Dungeon Masters? Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker, and welcome back to my channel. First, I just want to say a big thank you to those of you who have supported my channel and content by buying me a coffee. It really is encouraging. Thank you again, and now let's get into today's video. Today we're looking at how the basic set red box introduced us to the concept of becoming a Dungeon Master, or DM. There's been a bit of a stir online recently regarding the lack of DMs in respect of 5th edition, with the main reason being cited as the rules being too complicated or cumbersome. We'll get into why new players might feel this way later in the video, but first, how did the red box basic D&D set get early players who had never heard of role-playing to attempt dungeon mastering and facilitate the enjoyment of others? In case you're visiting for the first time, BECMI is an abbreviation for the words Basic, Expert, Companion, Master and Immortal, the names of the 5 Dungeons & Dragons box sets written by Frank Mentzer and released between 1983 and 1986. These box sets were later amalgamated into the Rules Cyclopedia in 1991 by Aaron Alston. BECMI is widely cited as the complete Dungeons & Dragons game, and the point of my channel is to basically discuss that. So let's dive into the red box. Well, the most obvious aspect of the contents is that they are separated into the Player's Manual and the Dungeon Master's Rulebook. So right off the bat, there is a clear designation between Player and Dungeon Master. Well, there's nothing too special about this, considering Advanced Dungeons & Dragons had released a separate Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide and Monster Manual from 1978. However, the basic sets books are quite thin in comparison, with the Player's Manual being a little over 60 pages and the Dungeon Master's Rulebook not even reaching 50. By comparison, the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook is nearly 130 pages long, and the Dungeon Master's Guide comes in at 240. Now, the main difference for this was, of course, that the basic set was an introductory product. It only dealt with levels 1 to 3 and set the scene for the game. But while some might argue it was inferior to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for having, let's say, less stuff, this actually meant its introductory focus was on teaching the game rather than just presenting the rules. I've alluded to how it did this for new players in my How Alina and Bargle Set the Tone video, link below. But was a thinner Dungeon Master's Rulebook a benefit to enticing players to become Dungeon Masters? For that we'll have to look at the contents. These consist of a 2-page introduction to DMing, followed by a 10-page small adventure for you to run, after just 2 pages of introduction. On closer inspection though, this adventure is very instructional and supports the reader to facilitate the game. We'll have a closer look in a moment. Following the adventure, we have just 8 pages on procedures and rules, basically dealing with things that may come up when running a D&D game and how to deal with them. And this is followed by 18 pages of monsters, 6 pages on treasure, and 3 pages on ideas for creating your own dungeons. That's it. That's all. So why, in my opinion, was this lean amount of content a good thing? Well, 2 things actually. First, the lean quality of the Dungeon Master's Rulebook was not intimidating in the slightest. Players could look at it and immediately think, I can do that. Second, it comes down to quality over quantity. The introductory language was key, and this was supported by a tutorial-like adventure, but from behind the Dungeon Master screen. Let's have a quick look at the introductory language. The first thing that is addressed is setting the tone for the game through what's called the most important rule, with the use of 2 words that I'm not certain are specifically used in later editions to describe the role of the DM. You can let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. These 2 words are be fair. Specifically, the prospective DM is told, there is one rule which applies to everything you will do as a Dungeon Master. It is the most important of all the rules. It is simply this: be fair. The DM is told they must not take sides in the following way. The players are not fighting the DM. The characters may be fighting the monsters, but everyone is playing the game to have fun. The players have fun exploring and earning more powerful characters, and the DM has fun playing the monsters and entertaining players. This wonderful reminder of why we play the game is summed up a few paragraphs later when we're told to remember Although the monsters may be fighting the characters, you are not fighting the players. If you try to entertain them, they will entertain you. Play the roles of the monsters, but forget them when they are slain. Their only purpose in the long run is entertainment. Now these paragraphs serve to state that the game of Dungeons & Dragons is a collaborative one, but one that can quite easily become adversarial. The new DM's attention is being drawn towards this fact, and directed towards the ideal approach. It really is a neat bit of wording that makes one want to keep reading. After a short section on how to run events and encounters, we are thrown in at the deep end with what's referred to as your first game. After a short pre-game checklist to go through, you are running a game. You are a Dungeon Master, and you are facilitating the enjoyment of your players. The adventure contained in the book is well known in D&D lore. It is, of course, the small expedition to the ruins of a castle called Mistamere that was once ruled by a magic user called Gygar. In addition, you are informed that it may hold the whereabouts for the renegade bandit Bargle. Since the players will have likely have read the Alina and Bargle introduction in the player's manual, they will be chomping at the bit to get some revenge. The adventure is designed with the now familiar read-aloud text boxes for informing the players of their surroundings. However, this is continuously followed with tutorial text to help new DMs get their bearings and understand what they should be doing. Here's a great example after the characters arrive at the castle and notice a fallen door near the entrance. Encourage the players to send someone forward to examine the door. They should do so to be sure their path will be safe. If they don't investigate now, a hidden monster could surprise the party as they pass by. The following encounter is a warm-up for both you and the players to practice playing in a group. Find out which characters are examining the door closely and which are keeping watch for other dangers. What follows is the group's first experience of a combat encounter with a carrion crawler that was in the pit under the door. Again, the DM is supported by the tutorial how to handle the encounter, including how to resolve saving throws against the creature's paralysing attack. Once the combat has ended, assuming everyone has survived, the DM is encouraged to suggest the characters search the creature's lair and also search for traps. What could be in there? It doesn't really matter. The DM is introduced to the concept of motive and reward, whilst communicating this concept to their players. Why are the adventurers out here anyway? To find treasure, of course. This isn't a save the world adventure path that we might see written today. This is a bunch of simple nobodies looking to loot a local ruin, and if that means climbing into a pit of some disgusting vermin, then so be it. The next encounter is infamous in D&D lore. 10 kobolds. 10. What was Frank Mentzer thinking? I lost count of how many characters were lost in this encounter. No, really, I lost count. Apart from it being a bit of a meat grinder, this encounter introduced enemies with access to missile combat into the game, including the use of cover and movement, which the DM is encouraged to engage with. However, there is one aspect of this encounter which I think is key to the Dungeon Master's development, and that's reward for clever play and thinking outside of the box. It would be very easy to just run this encounter as a fight to the death situation, but the DM is informed of what can happen if the party capture and interrogate one of the kobolds. Defeating all of the creatures results in a few coppers of loot. Capturing one results in buying its freedom with their combined buried treasure, a cool 100 gold pieces. Whether the players recognise this opportunity or not, the DM is being taught that clever play should be rewarded, either through the means demonstrated here, or through obtaining clues or information. It doesn't matter. The idea that not everything is obtained through killing your enemies is made clear. The adventure continues using a form of drip feeding of game mechanics, so that the new DM can learn how to manage the game, the choices of the players, and the effects of these choices. Examples include an encounter with some harpies, which may result in the members of the party being charmed. There's avoiding damage from structural perils, and also dealing with the effects of strange magic should you decide to lie on a mouldy but comfortable looking bed. The instructional text continues to support the DM through these encounters, whilst also encouraging decision making that makes for an enjoyable game. The adventure as written deals with only the surface level of the ruined castle, but a map of the second underground level is also provided, and the Dungeon Master is encouraged to exercise the next step in their DM development, which is to populate it based on ideas given later in the handbook. This second level map shows steps descending down into the third level, for which the new DM is encouraged to come up with a design for that level, and to populate it. Essentially, what we have here is a game tutorial, where the Dungeon Master is supported in facilitating a Dungeons & Dragons game. They are steered towards how to deal with situations by the slow reveal of rules and mechanics. They are then given a half-completed dungeon to populate to continue the story, to aid in their development as a game creator, and the entire tutorial concludes with the encouragement to design a third level that should contain the dastardly Bargle and his cronies. The text goes as such. This area is left entirely for you to design. It should include the lair of Bargle, a chaotic magic user level 5 to 7, and his guards, charmed ogres, plus his wandering decoys, living crystal statues dressed like Bargle, and possibly some doppelgangers as well. You may also include a small tunnel leading to a large cavern, the lair of a small dragon. Such a cavern should have a large exit leading outside in the nearby mountains, and the dragon should not be part of the normal dungeon. You may make this cavern known to Bargle, and the dragon might be his friend. The cavern could provide an escape route for Bargle if the party is conquering the dungeon. Now conceive where this bit of text might take the imagination of a new Dungeon Master. They may take this advice, or they may come up with something entirely different. The point is that they be motivated to progress the story, and that's the objective of the entire handbook. With that objective potentially achieved, the handbook offers the 18 pages of monster descriptions I mentioned earlier, followed by instructions for treasure. In one 10-page adventure, we have a budding new Dungeon Master with their imagination firing off in all directions. So returning to my earlier reference to the lack of 5th edition Dungeon Masters, a new player starting with 5th edition would be introduced to a 320-page player's handbook, followed by a 320-page Dungeon Master's Guide and a 350-page monster manual. If that's not intimidating, I don't know what is. Sure, I understand that these contain information needed to run the game up to 20th level. Much of it's superfluous in my humble opinion, but even just leafing through the Dungeon Master's Guide, it isn't clear where one would start. The presentation suffers from trying to cover all the bases instead of just covering the basics. I know the 5th edition starter set addresses some of these issues, but seriously, if you're going to carry on playing the game, who wants to have to purchase the rules twice? Oh wait, maybe Wizards of the Coast. Anyway, the 1983 Basic Set's Introduction to DMing has just not been replicated. There have been improvements in later editions in terms of how to develop villains and plots, but much of this has benefited from the development of playstyle over decades. Ultimately, players need to be encouraged to attempt DMing in the first place, and I believe the Basic Dungeon Master's Handbook did this best through its non-intimidating design and supportive content. Well, that's it for now. If you liked listening to me waffling about all this, then please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I have more content on the way as I explore the BECMI edition and its adventures. These videos do take quite a bit of time and thinking, so if you think I deserve it, please consider buying me a coffee, link in the description. It gives me even more encouragement to keep going. Otherwise, no worries, I still hope to see you here in the future. I'm BECMI Berserker, take care, and I'll see you back here soon.